Let's talk about some issues with Warhammer 40k and how its management by Games Workshop can be iffy at times. Games Workshop has almost always been something that the Warhammer community has had to worry about, with it being the managerial and business part of 40k. In this video, I hope to showcase some giant oopsies that the community has written on their Cassius belly for why they hate Warhammer 40k and where it's gone since its initial conception. Let's go over some of the things that happened in either the lore, tabletop, or management side of our favorite sci-fi universe. Or you might like Star Wars or something, I don't really judge. This is not a video saying that these issues prove that Games Workshop are these devils, these horrible, disgusting, ruinous powers who laugh and eat our souls. Well, maybe they are. Let's just say if I ever get sponsored or given anything by Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, or 40k related, then they are the best company ever. And if they don't, they get no brownie points from me. This list is comprised of some community opinion and some personal opinion. If you have some stuff you want to let off your chest about how you hate Games Workshop, make sure to tell me in the comments down below though. Also subscribe and ring the bell to keep updated when I post a new video. With that, on to the main section of the video. Firstly, let's talk about something that was an issue for over a decade for Warhammer 40k. Which is the writing and lore that Matt Ward wrote, especially the lore and actions of the Ultramarine Space Marine Legion at that time. This issue still being constantly talked about. Despite being the de facto main characters of the 40k from the start of the first edition of Rogue Trader, there's been an unwritten rule that everyone and everything must suck in the grim darkness of the far future, with the gradual degradation of humanity ruining all. The issue is that the Ultramarines' second company and their former captain, Cato Sicarius, were some of the most blatant plot armor-clad creatures in all of the universe. These golden blue handsome gentlemen continually took win after win. This completely messes with the overall tone of the universe, with humanity almost always coming out on top, when usually millions and billions of people are supposed to be eradicated each day. Cato Sicarius is one of the most outrageous people in all Warhammer 40k, where he's used his well-defined, nice-looking, incredibly dense head to run face-first into combat. In books and other writings, it is said that Cato Sicarius is very, very courageous, but in reality he's a brickhead idiot who goes for daring charges and does ill-advised heroic moves, making it so he endangers lives when he tries to seem all radical and cool. And in reality, he's just a confident idiot who always happens to just win. With there even being detractors to how he acts in lore, because of how much people hated this. Eventually this win streak stopped when the Tyranids showed up to Macragge and ate everybody. But before that though, most if not every story having to deal with the second company of Ultramarines was for Matt Ward, and he became hated in the community because of how he wrote them. Armies that just got reworked on tabletop are usually a disaster too. For the one that sticks out in my mind the most, the Leagues of Votann were all around generalists like Space Marines. Although they were a bit slower and had less wounds, they had void armor. This made it so wound rolls could not be re-rolled against them at all, which still kept them afloat in the meta in 9th edition, but they got rid of void armor at 10th, so they suck now maybe. They had scary and spooky shooting, with their melee theoretically being able to take down a knight in one turn if all rolling is done perfectly. They were one of the best armies on tabletop probably ever, with them also having another way to guarantee wounds on any target with judgment tokens, being able to flatten anyone in their path. Every other part of their release was actually pretty cool, with their lore being fun and interesting, allowing for them to sit comfortably in the idea of being a riff off of fantasy dwarfs, but in space this time. Like how every Warhammer 40k faction is a riff off of something fantasy-like. The Leagues of Votann are just one of the most recent and worst times this has happened. This has pretty much occurred with every single faction on tabletop at various points, unless you're Death Guard. One of the largest issues that plagues Warhammer in general is the lack of communication to the community. This is seen when the community has backlash to each and every announcement that Games Workshop puts out, well, at least for the most part. For a good few years, that was its history. There were always ill omens coming out about the future of Warhammer 40k and where it would go next. Heck, there still is some announcements that have been done in recent history that make everyone pick up their pitchforks and ready to fight. Overall, Games Workshop has a horrible history of not helping out the community and sometimes actively antagonizing it, like poking us, the people who give them money, with sticks. Recently there are hopeful changes though, with the rules of all models and the general game rules being released online for free officially over the course of summer 2023. Warhammer 40k is really hard to get into. To start it off, there are decades and decades of lore stacked on top of each other. Seems like there are hundreds of wiki articles and books to read through, making it feel like you have to read from the start to the present events of the universe. Don't get me wrong, the in-depth lore is freaking amazing. It's just intimidating for new fans. While also having multiple books full of rules for the armies that you need to build if you want to play on tabletop at all, with there being hours of research to get into that. Plus there's the whole hobby of painting miniatures and actually getting good at them and thinning your paints. Man, it's almost like this tabletop game was made by a bunch of sweaty nerds in a basement that knew exactly what other sweaty nerds like me would like, which makes it really hard for people who only have a small amount of time to dedicate towards their hobbies, making them fall behind. But if you do have a computer for it, games work as an okay bandage to still get you into the universe. With many games out there, I'm sure there's at least one that you would like to try and would have fun with. If you haven't yet, I would recommend watching my video on the Warhammer games that came out during 2022, just to see if any of them would be for you. Asking price increases for models and army building are another large barrier for entry for anyone who actually wants to get into tabletop and the painting portion of the hobby. With you having to put a mortgage on your house and maybe sell your liver if you want to play and paint your own army, which is about $200 to $300 American dollars depending on which models you want for a 500-point army. In current times, most miniatures have gone up by at least $5 American dollars. This is all for 3D printed plastic sprues that you have to take out, glue together, and paint all on your own, while doing a million other things, which is something that both and I and others like to complain about. I just don't post about it very often. Another issue with collecting models is dealing with not only your character being killed, but the model being discontinued. This can make it so your favorite models or characters will be killed and never talked about again. For example, let's bring up the old Baal Eye Commissar Yarrick, who died. And that's it, we don't know how. That's all we know. Heck, we don't even know if he died for sure, or if it was just some Imperium propaganda. They just kinda discontinued his model and then put out no lore about it, with him getting no new rules in the newest Guardsman Codex. This made it so a plotline that was very crucial with Commissar Yarrick and it seemingly gets dropped out of nowhere, never to be brought up again. Ghazghkull's beautiful lifelong partner was killed and no lore about it, and how the orcs would be freaking peeved about their favorite little guy dying was brought up. This has happened for many characters who have gone and never come back, making it so your favorite character is never talked about again. Warhammer Plus is a subscription service that was released in August 2021, being hated for not only being yet another streaming service that someone would have to buy, but because it wasn't even that good. Most of the lore discussion is easily found and done better by some YouTube content creators. The other content pushed is shows and entertainment that has been given an overall lukewarm reception, with low budgets and just kinda looking bad, being glorified slideshows, it being hard to justify even getting a subscription, giving more money to a hobby that directly vacuums it from your wallet. From some news sources, the subscription service only has about 115,000 members in 2022, which is an awesome business decision because there's about $1 million in that bank account every 2 months. And why not, right? It's still very profitable and reportedly still growing. So it still won't be going the way of Warhammer Fantasy. Good for them. I'm glad they're finding success with it. I'm totally not punching the air or anything. Something that always rears its ugly head is when anything physical is announced and released. There being artificial product scarcity and scalpers. Things like a limited stock for some of the smaller stores make it so there could be as little as 2 boxes for the product you want in that store. This makes the practice of scalping, where the price is inflated and often the only way to get the thing you want in a timely manner, with the price being marked up and of course negatively impacting the community as a whole. Meanwhile, trying to order them online can take half a year, so yeah, that's pretty darn horrible. Good luck trying to get your lion miniature, guys! With this being something that I actually kinda like, the Primaris Marines were a large point of contention in the community when they were first announced. This happened right after the fall of Acadia and resurrection of Rebute Guilliman, where the immortal, mostly machine scientist Belisarius Cawl created Space Marines, but better. The idea of new Marines coming around just didn't really jive with the franchise, making it so Terran-born Space Marines would come in and take the places of your favorite characters. Plus, making Space Marines, but better, wasn't exactly subtle. Although nothing in 40k is. Eventually though, people thought it over and didn't care that much because their models looked cool and characters got some good Primaris upgrades that made their classic models look great revamped on tabletop. Or it was just a sickening case of Stockholm Syndrome. Most hate for these upgraded Space Marines died down for the most part, with some lore retcons to make sure they're not all stupid dumbheads. Although it is kind of funny, because the Imperium did get a Primarch and new Marines, making it so humanity might win. But the universe in current day 40k is in a pretty horrible state, so it's okay, it kind of makes sense. But I don't know if it was that deep personally. I like the Primaris Marines, and maybe I'm just a brain-dead gormless homunculus for liking them in the first place. And lastly, we have quite possibly the worst thing that Games Workshop has ever done. But some people completely leaving the hobby because of what they did. The horrible thing that was getting rid of most of its creative community in 2021. This happened in a big bid to secure Warhammer's copyright license, and also their characters, shutting down a lot of the community's creative projects. Some would get the opportunity to work with Games Workshop and Warhammer directly, whilst other parts of the community were just left out dry and told to cope. Main casual being a beautifully written and funny series, Emperor TTS. With all of it still being on YouTube if you guys want to check it out, I definitely recommend it. With most of the commonly attributed characterization from the community being from that series. At least they got a continuation, with pretty similar characters being used in the Vampire Masquerade universe. So what do you guys think about Games Workshop? Are they the worst guys ever, or are they just some silly little guys that never really understood how to do the whole business and finances thing? What do you think their most questionable business practice is? Make sure to tell me in the comments down below. And like and subscribe if you want to, oh my gosh. That's all I got for now. Until next video, fellas.